I hope that you stay on, and I hope that you'll find every discussion helpful and insightful. We'll kick off with a brief overview or highlights from the policy brief, particularly looking at what the policy brief covered as regards Zambia. So the policy brief is looking at how the legal landscape or how the legal environment, policy environment, and just practice of SRHR has changed over the past 20 years. Some gains that have been recorded, some barriers that still exist, and some drawbacks maybe that have occurred in that time period. So to take us through that, I will invite my colleague, Vivian Kasunda, to go on with her presentation. Vivian, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vivian Kasunda. I'm also a researcher with SALC. So today I'll be taking you through the legal environment in Zambia. So let me just share my screen. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you so much. So this is basically a short presentation on the legal environment affecting key populations in Zambia. So we'll first start off with the treaties or the laws that guarantee sexual and reproductive health rights in the country. Now, when we're referring to sexual and reproductive health rights, we're basically talking about the application of human rights to sexuality, to sexual health, to reproduction, and also reproductive health. Some of the major international treaties guaranteeing sexual and reproductive health rights that Zambia is a party to include the CEDAW, that's the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, as well as the Maputo Protocol. So Zambia is a party to these treaties. And some of the rights that you could use to advocate for sexual reproductive health rights include the right to health, the right to found a family, to bodily autonomy and integrity, the right to make free, informed decisions about reproduction, family planning, and also freedom from violence. So these are all included in some of these treaties. And some of the rights that you could indirectly use to advance SRHR include the right to access to information, equality and non-discrimination, privacy, life, and human dignity. And some of the constitutional rights that are available within Zambia include the right to health, personal security, freedom to make decisions about reproduction, equality and non-discrimination, life, human dignity, and all. So those are some of the rights that you could use when you're advocating for sexual and reproductive health rights. And you could also extend these by also using court judgments, which we'll have a look at as we continue with the presentation. So some of the key changes that we've had in the law that we could directly apply to Zambia. In 2014, we have the Gender Equity and Equality Act, which domesticates the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, as well as the Maputo Protocol. And this provides for gender equality and sexual reproductive health rights in the country. And then in 2016, we also had the SADC modern law on child marriage, which provides a blueprint for SADC states to have laws that eradicate child marriages and to also deal with its consequences. So the progressive enactment of these laws outlawing child marriages also shows the importance of regional campaigns and commitments to affecting change across the region. And then in 2021, we also had the SADC model law on gender-based violence, which provides a framework for SADC states on laws addressing gender-based violence. And then in 2023, we had the Marriage Act in Zambia, which establishes the minimum age for marriage at 18 years. Now, this is very important because it also outlaws child marriage. And then moving on to the next slide. Hello?
We can get you.
Yes, we can hear
Okay.
you.
All right, great. We also have the Zambia Gender Equity and Equality Act, which is very progressive in providing a comprehensive list of sexual and reproductive health rights in line with the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, as well as Article 14 of the Maputo Protocol. It provides for duties of the public and health officials to uphold these rights and also enforcement mechanisms, which is very important because it's one thing to have rights, but it's another thing to have rights that can actually be enforced. And then unfortunately, we still have a lack of public knowledge of these rights and, you know, poor implementation of these rights, which hampers the realization of the rights themselves. The Act also establishes a Gender Equity and Equality Commission to manage and oversee the implementation of the law. But to date, this has not been operationalized, which is one of the problems that we're facing in Zambia. And then some of the key court decisions that we've had. In 2020, we had an advisory opinion on vagrancy laws in Africa, in which the African Court on Human and People's Rights affirmed that vagrancy laws breach the rights to the dignity of poor and marginalized communities, and they're incompatible with the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. So the case also recognized the specific impact on sex workers and gender nonconforming persons, and it broadened the interpretation of other status in the prohibited grounds of discrimination in the African Charter. So previously, you didn't have gender nonconforming as part of, you know, ways in which you can discriminate against another person, and the African Court changed this in this particular decision. And then moving on to some of the court decisions. In Zambia particularly, we haven't had any specific case, unless I'm wrong. Maybe other presenters will present on that. But so far, we haven't had any case specifically relating to sexual and reproductive health rights. But should there be any case that you would like to litigate on, you could use some of these cases that we've found in neighboring countries and also within the African region. So you've got cases in Kenya in which the High Court, the Constitutional Court upheld the ban of female genital mutilation. You have a case in Malawi which provided clarity on access to safe abortion on health grounds. You've got another case in Kenya which affirmed the blanket decriminalization of abortion, including in cases of pregnancy resulting from sexual assault. You also had cases in Nigeria and some other cases in Kenya. So the policy brief has been published. It's on the SALC website. I think, Emanuela, you can put the link in the chat box so that they can have the full overview of the cases. So there's a number of cases that could be used to help advance sexual and reproductive health rights in Zambia. Now, some of the persistent issues that we're facing, we've got high rates of maternal deaths and severe injury still happening in hospitals, not just within Zambia, but also across Africa. And this is mostly due to the criminalization of abortion and issues like that. And then you also have gender-based violence and harmful cultural practices. The high rates of adolescent pregnancies in the region expose young women to risks of child marriages and also maternal deaths and injuries. So this is one of the major problems that we're facing. And, you know, it causes the maternal deaths that we're seeing across the region. And then we also have stigma and discrimination against key populations. So despite the considerable reduction in HIV prevalence in general over the years, the rates amongst key populations have remained high. So in 2021, it was estimated that the key population rates contributed to 51% of all new infections in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, this mostly happens, the stigma and discrimination is mostly a cause of this, because you find that key populations such as sex workers are trying to access, healthcare services and hospitals and clinics, and they're being discriminated against. As a result, they prefer to just stay away, and they say, we're not going to get health services. And because of that, you find that, it increases the spread of diseases and, things like that. And then we also have the maintenance and use of criminal laws that penalize sexual conduct and status. So this is one of the major issues still within Africa that we're experiencing. The countries that have still continued to criminalize consensual same-sex relationships, or consensual same-sex acts rather. And this shouldn't be the case. And then you also have unsafe abortions, also due to the criminalization of, abortion in different states within the region. And then more persistent issues, we have the inconsistencies between law, policies, and practice, which create confusion amongst service providers or healthcare workers. So you'll find that in a country, like for example, this is an example with Zambia particularly, the age of consent to sex is 16, whereas the age of consent to sexual and reproductive health rights is not given. So there's no specific age by law in which a person can go to the hospital and access sexual reproductive health care services. However, you find that if, let's say, a child as young as 12 or 13 goes to the hospital to say, look, I want to access sexual reproductive health care, they receive judgment from, nurses, doctors, other healthcare workers, and things like that. And yet that shouldn't be the case. So just because the age of consent to sex is 16, it doesn't necessarily mean 16 is also the age in which somebody can go and access sexual reproductive health care in hospitals or clinics. So that's one of the issues that we're also facing within the region, not just in Zambia. And then we also have Zambia's Termination of Pregnancy Act, in which abortion is allowed on socioeconomic as well as medical ground. But because of the lack of public awareness of the law, it hampers the actual access. So you find that people don't know that they can go and seek an abortion on the grounds of socioeconomic or medical grounds. And then you find that they do backstreet abortions, and they end up in hospital, and, all sorts of issues arise from that. And then gender-based violence is also still a consistent issue in the region, despite the legal and policy efforts to eradicate it. We also have harmful practices, which are also a form of gender-based violence, such as child marriages and female genital mutilations, which affect young women and girls disproportionately, making them vulnerable to HIV, as well as sexual and reproductive health violations. And then we also have high rates of teenage pregnancies, which are attributed to child marriages, leading to high maternal deaths and morbidity for young women and girls. So those are some of the issues and the legal barriers that we noticed when we're doing this policy brief. And then, okay. Another persistent issue is the criminalization and persecution that key populations face. So the criminalization of key population is usually done through direct criminal laws that target them, or indirect offenses like vagrancy laws or other petty offenses. So in Zambia's Penal Code, Section 155 to 158 criminalizes same-sex sexual conduct. So this is one of the major issues that we're experiencing, not only in Zambia, but as I stated earlier, also within the region. And then you also have violence against LGBTQI+ persons, which includes blackmail, hate speech, sexual assault, also arbitrary arrest. And basically you find that LGBTQI+ persons are targeted not just by the police, but even community members. where you'll find, let's say, a lesbian girl is being gang raped so that they can, turn back to being, a heterosexual person, which is not supposed to be happening. So you have violence against the LGBTQI community that's persistent and going on within the region. And then you also have sex workers who experience extensive police abuse, such as harassment, arbitrary arrests, and detentions using the law, and also with few successful prosecutions. So with sex workers, usually they'll use the vagrancy offenses, or they'll say, you're being idle and disorderly on the street, and then they get arrested, whereas they're being arrested for being sex workers, basically. So sections 55, 2, and 3 of the Penal Code are some of the sections that are used to target sex workers. So this is basically engaging in sex work and soliciting others in a public place for the purposes of engaging in sex work. Those are some of the provisions that are used to target sex workers. And then you also have issues with persons living with HIV. So Section 183 of the Penal Code specifically criminalizes the intentional or negligent spread of an infection of a disease. And this is a bit problematic because even if you don't know, you could still get arrested, which should not be the case. According to Section 3 of the Anti-Gender-Based Violence Act, sexual abuse also includes infecting another person with HIV or other STI. Now, you can imagine if somebody doesn't know that and they're getting arrested for doing that. So this is also some of the issues that we have with the law. So this also affects access to healthcare, and it creates barriers in seeking health care as well. Now, we also have overbroad and unjust laws that target persons living with HIV, as I've stated earlier, which increases stigma, discrimination, and also negatively impacts access to sexual and reproductive health rights. So this also has an impact on the HIV prevention and management programs due to the chilling effect of criminalization. So basically what I just explained earlier. And then we also have an issue with transgender and intersex persons who usually face difficulties in acquiring legal documents, such as identity documents or passports that match their gender identity. So you find that the mismatch between the gender presentation and the identification pronouns leads to a barrier in accessing government initiatives and programs requiring legal documentation, including healthcare. So you find that if a transgender person goes to a government office and says, look, I am a male, and yet they present as female, they will have issues accessing legal documents, and there'll be that whole debate of no, but you look female, or no, but you look male, which shouldn't be the case. So we also have emerging issues, such as the closing of civil space. One of the major issues we have is public order laws that restrict activism, including protests, online speech, and media communications. So in Zambia particularly, the public order law remains unreformed despite government undertakings, and it is increasingly used to suppress assembly. So, for example, there was an issue that happened in which women were arrested at an anti-gender-based violence march and were instead accused of promoting LGBTQI rights. So this was a whole problem on its own. And then we also have the funding cuts, which I'll also discuss further in the next slide, which are affecting CSOs and impact advocacy and service provision provided by CSOs. So another emerging issue we have is the anti-rights and regression movements. We have movements that are advocating against sexual reproductive health rights, that are advocating against gender equality and human rights as well, which affects the rights and welfare of key populations. Most of these movements are largely funded by the US and European ultra-conservative groups, and they are characterized by the spread of hate speech and misinformation, as well as lobbying for political, professional, and religious leaders across Africa. So they're basically targeting the bigger or the majority rather than the minority, or the majority so that they can attack the minority within the African states. There's also a growing organization of regional convenings in Africa that is funded by the US conservative fundamentalist groups that appear to influence legislative changes restricting SRHR. So an example of such a convening happened in Kenya in May 2025. And basically they resolved to advocate for the revision of laws and policies in Africa to undermine gender equality and sexual and reproductive health rights. So that is becoming a problem. And then the issue of funding cuts, because of what happened in January, the US government announced a freeze and also cut a majority of funding for global aid, which included PEPFAR and UNAIDS funding. So it has led to a reduction in funding for health, human rights, and other pressing issues. HIV prevention programs have either been cut or scaled down. Some NGOs have been closed down. Some of them that were working particularly to have sexual and reproductive health rights or sexual health care access to key populations, they've also had to shut down. They've also affected human resources needed for the distribution of treatment, prevention, counseling, etc. for the HIV response. So it has led to the closure of key population services provided by NGOs as well, in the assumption that key populations could automatically be reintegrated into the public health services, which is not the case. So I think one of the major issues we've had is that this particular assumption that, key populations such as sex workers or LGBTQI persons can easily just go to public hospitals to access healthcare, which is not the case, because then we wouldn't need these NGOs to begin with. The NGOs that were providing healthcare were the ones that, would support key populations and would give key populations healthcare without any form of, discrimination or stigma, which is something that they were running away from when they went to public hospitals. So this is one of the issues that the funding cuts has brought. So how do we respond to the crisis as NGOs, as CSOs, as advocates, litigants, whoever? So firstly, we could ring fence and reinforce human rights principles and standards, such as equality and non-discrimination through advocacy and the courts. So earlier I stated how we could have indirect rights that apply to sexual reproductive health rights. So things like access to information, things like equality and non-discrimination, those are some of the rights that you could use to advocate for sexual and reproductive health rights. You can also use the government's willingness to be party to international human rights norms. So Zambia is already a party to quite a number of treaties, and it's domesticated some of them, as you saw earlier on. So those avenues that we could use to also use such laws to litigate on sexual and reproductive health rights. Then you also have regional advocacy, you have community empowerment, to resist rollbacks, to defend rights, and to also self-advocate. Because what sometimes happens is that we will be here as advocates, as CSOs, advocating for the rights of sex workers, advocating for the rights of LGBTQI plus persons, or other groups, and yet the groups themselves are taking a seat back. So it's important that all these groups also come out to say, look, we are being affected in this way. We are the ones having these experiences, to share lived experiences. I know that Emanuela will talk about lived experiences as the program grows, but it's also important that we speak out. We do self-advocate. We self-advocate for our own rights. So those are some of the strategies that we could put into use. And having said that, this brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Emanuela, over to you.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you for setting the scene. Thank you for highlighting important legal provisions and just what the legal environment looks like. That I think really lines up really well for our next segment, which is lived experiences. So we'll be hearing from different people who are part of our key focus today, which is people that are part of key populations. And on this segment, I will hand over to Emilia from TBZ from Transbantu Zambia. She will just give a brief explanation of what Transbantu Zambia does and also introduce the different panelists that will be sharing their lived experiences. Emilia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Emanuela, and also for the overview that came before. I think a lot of us have learned things that we didn't know before. So thank you so much, Vivian, as well for that. We have a few panelists that are going to be able to share their experiences in accessing SRHR. We have Brenda, we have Machwani, we have Mimi, and I think we have Natasha on the call. There's somebody in the waiting room as well. I don't know if you can check for me, Manuela, but it should be a Modi Makusa. They will introduce themselves when they join. Maybe we can start with Brenda. You can help us with your experiences trying to access SRHR. They're going to be speaking specifically around the female sex workers and the challenges or the successes that they've had in experiencing SRHR. Thank you. Brenda, you can take us away.
Hi everyone. Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Brenda.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I want to share my lived experience, especially dealing with government facilities. You find that you want to access SRHR, like family planning. It's a challenge when you're not married, because there are questions that they ask, relevant questions that you find yourself that you're not even free to open up to them. Sometimes you find that you want access like uh STS screening. You have an STI and then you need help. But the question that they'll be asking you, especially when they know that you are a female sex worker, it's bad whereby you fail to open up. You fail to open up for them to get the full information from you just because of the kind of
Hello, Brenda. Are you still with us? Can everybody hear me, or is it my network?
No, Brenda
get
has cut off.
I'm sure it's challenges with the
help.
network.
Yeah,
Brenda,
yeah.
Brenda, we lost you there. Can you just repeat, I think, your last couple of sentences? The network went.
Okay. I'm saying when you want to access the abortion, the safe abortion. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Yes, we can. Yes, we
You
can.
want to access, okay. You want to access the safe abortion. You find that no one is there, no one is willing to help you because the blame is always on us. Why are we doing sex work? Why are we sex workers when we can't even handle the outcome that it can bring? So it's very hard for us to open up to them, to give them the full information about us, because they always discriminate us. Even accessing condoms, lubricant, and PrEP. Say, why do you want to be on PrEP when you're just you? No, me, this is the kind of work that I do. Oh, no wonder. You just want to have PrEP, you just want to infect people. So that's discrimination. It hinders us to explain or to express ourselves. Even though we can say we have a right to health, they'll say you are just sex workers. There's nothing for you. We can't do anything for you. They judge us because of the work that we do. Are you getting me? Hello?
Yes, we do. Yes, we can.
No, all right, okay. even when you're just reporting cases to the police station, they will judge you because of the way that they look at you. Sometimes you just find that you're being attacked by someone who just a client hit you, used without giving you money. You went to the police station with blood, with bruises. Instead of them taking care of you as your health, they just say, this is what you get for doing sex work. You understand? So we can't even we can't even express ourselves like reporting cases that me have been violated. The police officers, they're the one that discriminate us most. Sometimes they even chase us, and it's not even good because we have the right to access, like to read, but we have the right to express ourselves, the freedom of movement, but they don't give us that right because of the work that we do. Thank you so much. Hello.
Thank you so much, Brenda. We appreciate you for sharing those experiences, which are, so Brenda is speaking as a female sex worker, but also as somebody that works with an organization that works with sex workers. And so these are the main challenges that usually come out from that. So thank you so much for that, Brenda. Mimi, perhaps you can share some challenges that you have had in accessing SRHR, especially as a transgender male, maybe specifically to your area or just in general. Thank you, Mimi. If you're with us, you can go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share. So I'll talk about some of the experiences that I've faced being a trans. So my name is Mimi, and I work for TBZ from Livingstone. And when it comes to Livingstone, it's really a small town, and there are few facilities, and accessing SRHR services here is kind of hard, especially if you're trans, because the moment you just reach at a facility, you're judged for how you look. Or why are you trying to be this when God made you this? So there's a time that I went to access services at the general clinic, and I walked in, minding my business and going for the services that I went to get. And here is a person that is attending to me, asking me questions that I didn't go for. First, why do you look like a man? Aren't you a woman? I'm like, I'm not feeling well and I'm here for my services. You don't have the right to ask me those questions. And then he says, I don't like attending to people like you. You just seen as you need to leave this place. Maybe find somebody else to help you. Things like that make us not want to go back to any facility or get services from there, because how am I going to open up about what I'm going through if they're not ready to even give me an opportunity to share or to open up on how I'm doing? It's hard because were judged and were asked why we're being asked without even hearing the services that we are there for. It's also for every trans that is within Livingstone, because going to these facilities is just a no. Like, we don't want to go there and start explaining over and over, and we don't want to get judged. So the stigma and discrimination is very high when it comes to governmental facilities, because people here are just not ready to understand or learn or help. Just, I know they're trained and they understand to say there are trans people around, but then they just don't want to do it because apparently they're religious and they follow that and take it to their workplaces, and this is why it's so hard to access SRHR services if you're a trans person. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Mimi.
Yeah. There are other places that we have KP-friendly people working there. So it's also when you just have somebody who's a KP-friendly facilitator that you can call and ask them for services, which is also leading to a lot of harm, because now we are just running to uh, pharmacies to get the medicine when you're sick, and we're doing our own prescription of medication, because if I go to the facility, I'm going to go through the same thing, and then I won't just go there. I'll just decide to do my own thing at home or get information from another person on how I can go. So accessing SRHR is really hard for a trans person within Zambia. Thank you very much, Emilia.
Thank you so much, Mimi, for that. I think highlighting challenges, especially around stigma and discrimination. It was mentioned in the presentation. When it comes to stigma and discrimination, it doesn't cover, when it says based off of gender identity, it just M and F. So trans people are kind of excluded, and I feel it has been evidenced that healthcare providers feel justified in that sense. And so they forcefully ask you to choose male or female. And then there's intersex people, and then also there's trans people. So these are constant challenges we face. So thank you very much, Mimi, for sharing that with everybody on the call. Machwani, if you're available, perhaps you can speak to the challenges in the Western Province as a trans woman, and also other experiences that other trans women have had. I know the previous presenter had mentioned about rapes for lesbian, but we also do face a large number of rape for transgender women, which cannot be even recorded because of GBV doesn't include trans people and or same-sex relationships. Machwani, you can go if you can right now.
All right. Good morning, and thank you for the chance to talk. So I'm going to talk about the barriers we get from healthcare services. Yeah. So you find that I don't know whether it's the lack of the provided knowledge or limited understanding on trans and the LGBTQ health needs. But then you find that when you're going to a facility, you want to access SRHR, and then just when you reach, you're having negative attitudes and biases from healthcare providers. So this makes it hard for a trans to access. It makes it hard for a trans person to access the services. For example, I have a case where you like went to the hospital. I went to the hospital, so I go there, and then just upon arriving, they're already laughing just because of how you're built, yeah. So already just because of the welcome you are getting, you have fear inside you, yeah. So that stops you from sharing because you're not having that nurse patient relationship. So the fear you get, so it's going to more like making a barrier between the two of you. So I go there, and instead of saying what I'm actually there for, I'm saying something else, just like to get out of the space and get it over with. So instead of accessing SRHR, I'm just saying no, I'm having this. So they give me Panadol or Septrin or whatever, and then at the end of the day, I haven't found the services I'm supposed to get from the healthcare providers. Then what else? Yeah, and the lack of legal protection. So you can, if for example, if me I'm to be raped, and then I don't have anywhere to report. So if you go there, just when you say I have been raped, they are not going to investigate. Instead, they're going to just catch you and put you in behind bars, because if you say you've been raped by boys, it means it's an abomination, if I could put it that way. So I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Machwani. I appreciate you sharing, especially touching around going to report abuses. So when something like rape happens, you are required to get a medical report and a police report. And so when you go to get a medical report, like in Machwani's area, there's a trans woman that did get raped. And so they had been taken to the hospital because at the police, they also need a medical report at the police station. And I think both places were very stigmatizing, and they were not professional, because the very next day after the trans woman had gone to the hospital, it was all over the news outlets that somebody got raped and all the graphic details of what happened. And then it was more like made a spectacle out of, and so the healthcare providers had leaked that story to the news outlets. And so then you find that they have to access mental health services, which are also not as available. For this, I'll let Natasha, if you're available to talk, perhaps you can just spare some time to maybe share with us the challenges with trying to get mental health services where you are.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yes, the challenges I've been facing is that to access mental health services it was all about how I dress, the stigma, and the therapists. They were not KP friendly. So I wasn't finding it easy to access the services because of the stigma and the why are you dressing like that? Are you lesbian or are you gay? That makes me not feel comfortable. They started preaching things for me. It's demonic to be dressed in such a way.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Would you like to go on?
No.
Okay. Thank you so much. And so those are also the other challenges, especially when it comes to mental health. It's almost next to impossible. We do try to get health services for key populations, but you find that if you're going there for other issues, it always turns into the other thing. And then, just as was mentioned in the presentation, things like dignity are not respected. And so even at police stations, even at hospitals, they're still going through those forced examinations. And so everything that was mentioned as the legal environment, some of them are happening, but for like GBV, it doesn't include same sex. So we have high rates of IPV in amongst key populations, IPV, also GBV for the sex workers who are unable to report, especially when they do face that from partners and or clients. But for trans relationships or same-sex relationships, those are next to impossible in reporting, because then it's going to be, why are you have the same sex? How come you are in a relationship? Once they start to investigate the case. And so it's next to impossible. Yeah. These are the only panelists that we have that have highlighted a lot of the issues that continue to be persistent. And because of lack of policy and protections, we also hit a wall in how we can mitigate these issues. But I think this was all from the panelists today. Thank you so much. Back to you, Manuela.
Everyone that has spoken and has shared their experience. I don't think it's an easy thing to, to give an account of what was obviously not a very good encounter with healthcare professionals or just the general public in just trying to access services. So, thank you for taking the time and for giving us insight of what happens on the ground. It's one thing to see the black letter of the law, it's another to hear how those laws actually operate on the ground and whether they actually operate to protect people from stigma and discrimination. So speaking about laws, we will hear now from some lawyers and legal practitioners about how, what what can people do? What can they do when they experience these things? What are some things, what are some legal avenues that are available, whether that's litigation-wise or advocacy-wise? What does that look like? How can they fight for their rights? So I will invite Yande Simkonda from No Simonza Legal Practitioners and Izzy Mulenga from Lotus Identity to take us through this section. Yande and Izzy.
I think Izzy can go first. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Hello, everybody. I hope we're all doing well, and I hope I'm audible.
Very audible.
All right. My name is Eliza Mulenga. I work as community legal assistant at the Lotus Identity, which is an organization that is committed to supporting key populations in Zambia with access to legal remedies, SRHR, advocacy, and human rights protections. So here at the Lotus Identity, I have worked directly with communities to document human rights violations and cases of discrimination, particularly in healthcare, employment, and public services. I also provide legal literacy and paralegal support, ensuring that individuals understand their rights and the mechanisms available to defend themselves. We also support survivors in filing complaints with government and independent bodies, also track progress on their cases and advocate for systematic accountability. So with today's session, I'll be speaking on how we can fight for our rights through litigation and advocative strategies, where I want to focus on some key cases that have happened. I won't dwell much on that because I think Vivian did speak a lot about the laws and policies earlier in her presentation. So I will try to just talk about the litigation and advocacy strategies for maybe advancing the rights of key populations and also complaints mechanisms, specifically from like the lived experiences that I've had so far, where we are looking at SRHR services, denials, and practical ways for how individuals can access how we can help practical ways for individuals to access redress. So since I won't dwell much on the laws and policies, which were tackled in the beginning of this meeting, I will try and maybe just go directly to the litigation and advocacy strategies that we can use. I think the first one would be, we need to be very strategic with case selection, especially if we want to go the litigation route. We have to choose the cases that have clear harm, probably strong evidence and symbolic potential, because usually we find that with cases that might be a little bit vague or do not have all this clear evidence or strong evidence, they are usually thrown out. And that is sadly to say, but that is what is on the ground. So sometimes it's very important for us to have, for individuals, especially if you've gone through denial, you make sure you get the name of the if it's health practitioner that you saw or that you went to that denied you those services, the name of the clinic. Try to make up your own data or evidence so that even as you go and report it, we do have all the necessary information. So it's very important that as individuals that are denied such services, we do take it up ourselves to make sure that we get enough evidence. We can also use like constitutional challenge and jurisdiction, where we understand which court has jurisdiction is very crucial, because I think earlier there was a case, there was a petition, filed by Isaac Mwanza and ZCLU challenging sections 155 of the Penal Code, which Vivian had earlier stated. And in this case, the use that the implication, sorry, for this case so happened to be that the court or the jurisdiction in which it was set out to be was denied, asking that it should be in its very own jurisdiction, and it had to be dismissed partly because it was brought in the wrong court. So it's us understanding, okay, if I've got this case that is happening on the ground, and maybe I want to use litigation, I want to go to court. Which courts can we go to if I want to bring about an issue? Maybe I was denied a service under, SRHR, and I want to, and for example, I go straight to the High Court. Will it be heard when I go there? So it's very important for us to understand the case at hand and which jurisdiction we are to use, or which courts we are to use for it to be heard. I think the third would be us combining litigation with advocacy. It's very important that I just not use courts, but we use public platforms for public education. We should be using media engagement and coalition building, where we have meetings online. For example, I think SAUC has done a lot of this, stations where people can come through and learn about, rights and legal empowerment. I have seen that. I have been part of such sessions as well. So also knowing that we can use platforms for public education would be the best way for us to combine litigation with advocacy. We also need to use data, testimonies, and documentation, and that is part of the work that I do specifically, where we collect, data, we collect lived experiences, the testimonies of individuals that have gone through this, and we document them, and that's where we use these cases to support advocacy as well as exposing patterns rather than the single incidents that happen. Also, it's very important for us to use policy and statutory instruments. For example, we should hold health ministries, public service providers accountable to SRHR policies, because, for example, we have the HIV and AIDS strategic framework. If such services are denied, we can make sure that we report these matters to these ministries. We need to use legal complaints or suit to force implementation of policy rather than only challenging criminal laws, which mostly we would find that, or if it's under litigation, people are trying to challenge that. But when it just comes to holding these ministries or the use of statutory instruments, it's barely done. We can also look at maybe how we engage in oversight, or maybe even complaint bodies. For example, engaging with the Human Rights Commission, the Public Protector, the Legal Aid Board, and so on, to make our complaints, because these may be faster or safer than full-on litigation. Also to obtain the findings and use them in court or advocacy. So whenever we find cases that probably these oversight bodies have used, it's easier for us to even advocate through litigation, because this would be what would be maintained, and we can use these cases to strengthen our litigation processes or cases at hand. Also, it's very important for us to understand mitigation risk and the stigma around working with key populations. We need to make sure that we ensure confidentiality. We need to make sure that we need to make sure that we have the person's or the client's legal protections, and also make sure that we make the client's personal information is safe, and as well as their well-being, they are protected, and we make sure that they are going to be safe even as they go through these issues, or if it's litigation, because those are exposed to the public, and that can come with a lot of scrutiny, as well as the safety of the individual. So we need, sometimes we can even anonymize maybe the evidence if possible, so that maybe that person's or the client's information is protected. It's also important for us to look at the coalition and intersectional advocacy, where we partner with faith-based organizations, with women rights groups, with youth organizations to build broader support. I think these are some of the ways that we can actually use litigation and advocacy strategies together. I think the last part that I wanted to talk about, because it's something that from the lived experiences has been touched upon a lot, would be the complaint mechanisms for SRHR deniers, especially for key populations in Zambia. I did speak about the Human Rights Commission, because the Human Rights Commission's mandate is to investigate violations of human rights, including discrimination in healthcare access. So individuals can lodge a written or oral complaint, or they can even go directly to the officers of human rights, as well as, call their toll-free line, which is 933. We also have the Ministry of Health, where you've got the client complaint desk. So most government health facilities have patient or client service charters with complaint desks. So patients that are denied services due to stigma or discrimination can file a complaint at a facility level, escalated to the district health office. They also have a hotline, the National Health Helpline, which is 888. You also can go to the Medical Council of Zambia, which regulates health professions and facilities. It handles professional misconduct, including denial of care. So the client can actually just write their complaint and submit it directly to the Medical Council of Zambia. You also have the anti-GB fast-track courts and victim support units, where survivors of sexual violence or denial of pay can report such cases. It also has a toll-free line, which is 116. I think also the last two would be the Office of the Public Protector, which is mandated to investigate maladministration and abuse of power by public officials, including those in hospitals and clinics. So individuals can just go directly there and report, as well as with working with civil society and independent mechanisms. For example, you have TBZ, you have the Lotus Identity, where you can actually come through and either community legal aid would be provided. You'd be supported with how to go about your case and who we can work with and the people that we collaborate with. I do know that TBZ offers paralegal support and also case referrals for key populations, which is the same work that the Lotus Identity does, and it links individuals to appropriate redress mechanisms. So it's important for us to take note that these are some of the ways that we can start making a difference and a change by actually, starting to report these matters whenever they occur, instead of just waiting. It's important that individuals do come through, and they if they cannot go to the direct offices, they can use partnerships like the CSOs, which are the Lotus Identity, Transvantu, Association of Zambia, and they can be helped and it would even deter further or other public servants from doing such things to other individuals. So it's important for litigation and advocacy to go hand in hand, as it provides, binding remedies and precedents, while advocacy ensures awareness, pressure, and implementation. So if we combine the national mechanisms with the regional international instruments, and grounding this in the community documentation and the lived experiences of the individuals, we can build a stronger movement for advancing SRHR and human rights for the key populations in Zambia. I think I can now hand it over to Yande to just say a couple of things.
Okay, thank you, Easy. Good morning. I don't know if we're all in the same time zone to all the panelists and anyone else tuned in. As mentioned, my name is Yande Simkonda. I'm a lawyer within Zambia and more specifically in Kitwe. I deal mainly in litigation, which is presentation of matters before our courts in Zambia, from commercial to general and constitutional matters, as it were. Regarding the subject we have here, specifically on SRHR and access thereto, I would like to deal with these issues on two fronts, mainly the legislative process and the judicial process. Okay, because for us as litigation lawyers, it really boils down to these two mechanisms under our laws. Judicially speaking, before I get into that, am I loud and clear?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, judicially speaking, I feel like the best way to air out the grievances experienced by many individuals, especially through the lived experiences, as I've heard, would be to be more tactical in the way matters are presented before our courts. We must understand that our courts basically just disseminate the law as it is right now. Okay. And in our criminal justice system, the law is considered to be a reflection of the collective morals of society at the time. In order to demonstrate the evolution or even the shift in what we may call morality or the subject of or extent of what people are engaging in, be it sexually or morally, there's need for very specific examples, okay, as we approach the courts. So in that sense, rather than taking general questions to our courts regarding constitutional infringements or rights on infringements or grievances regarding access to health or medical facilities or issues of discrimination, anything that you might consider as falling under the scope of what you're trying to safeguard or promote here must be presented before courts with a very specific example. I did hear Easy step into the realm of confidentiality and all that. For me, it's a battle of confidentiality versus awareness. So, for example, if there is currently an instance, as we heard through the lived experiences, where a person feels like they were denied fair access to medical or health treatment, that then becomes an opportunity, okay, to present before courts using that particular person as the figurehead, the driver of the matter, so that you present before courts actual evidence of instances where people are being maligned because of their sexual orientation or because of their appearances or suspicion of that. That then begins to open our courts' eyes into the evolution of our morality as a society and the endeavors that people are getting into, perhaps sexually and any other way. So for me, that would be the key strategy in getting success before courts. What I've noticed is the idea of just posing questions to the courts makes it very easy for a court to make a determination. because there's no reference to a specific happening or incident where a court can say, okay, looking at these sets of facts, I think we can compare it, say, to another previous event and another and another. That's how you develop a system of precedence. So as Izzy had even mentioned, the matter of Isaac Mwanza, you realize by getting into that matter that those are mere almost hypothetical questions, in as much as they make specific reference to legal provisions and how they may be discriminatory in reference to the Constitution and the Penal Code. Okay, there is no specific instance where that was presented in the matter, for example, where certain individuals felt that their privacy rights were infringed, okay, be it in the comfort of their own space or wherever. So that would be my strategy in terms of achieving justice before courts. I would like to believe that there are many instances, even as we speak, where people's rights are being infringed. Rather than remain coy or not bring out the person subjected to such treatment, why not use those as opportunities to present these matters before our court systems as serious examples of infringement? Okay, so that is that on the judicial front. Okay, that the whole idea behind that is to present almost an unending spectrum of the change in our society. It is only through that way that there will begin to see an acceptance of what people may consider normal here as it is in other countries or jurisdictions. And it is only that in that manner that courts are more reluctant or easy to the idea of giving more favorable or successful judgments on our part. The other would be the legislative process. Okay, I did hear in the introductions there was several reference to international treaties and agreements that the country is party to. As many of you may be aware, we do have our own legislative book or system, which is applied based on enactment by Parliament. And the main tool in criminalization would be, for example, the Penal Code itself, which is part of that legislative book. So in order to shift all these protective measures that are being achieved internationally, in order to create a shift in terms of protection even locally here, okay, there's need to domesticate those international treaties and best practices being achieved, because more often than not, you find that those international treaties are more advanced, okay, they're more forward thinking, they are more adaptive of the reality now, okay. It's one thing to be there and, gloat in the fact that the country is a party to this and that internationally. But the real question is, what is the application of those international treaties on the ground in the country, in places as far-flung as Western Province, where we're hearing lived experiences, or even in our Cosmo areas such as Lusaka and Livingstone? Are those international treaties and agreements being recognized, even just in practice or approach or analysis of any specific situation of infringement or constitutional rights, or of constitutional rights? Are any of those international treaties being considered? And more often than not, you find that that's not the case. So using our ratification laws here, we need to domesticate. And I do understand that maybe our membership in parliament may be reluctant to be seen as the ones to propagate such changes to the laws. But that's where mechanisms such as the private members bill comes in, because essentially most of these changes required in the law only affect a sect of society. So it's about that affected section demonstrating the troubles and challenges they're having, and therefore pushing these matters through private members' bills. It makes it easier, even in the instance that you decide to merely take a hypothetical question to our courts, if you have the supporting legislative provisions. But as it stands, our laws are so vague and require a lot of interpretation in order for them to even see some level of achievement on the ground. So for me,
Yes.
matters such as private members' bills would really go a long way in trying to hone in on what exactly you want the law to take recognition of. And really it boils down to my first point, which is that there's just need for awareness, okay, be it legally through the many examples and figureheads in the judicial matters that you may present, but also legislatively, where you may be seen to be pushing to have these protective measures being reduced to acts of parliament. Therefore, for me, I think that is the two ways or the two-way system in which the concerns of many of the persons I've heard here can be addressed. In a nutshell, I think that would be that.
Yes, thank you, Yande. You raised some very valid points, and we appreciate your perspectives from the legal practitioner side of things. Evidence, of course, is very important in litigation, and that's how a strong case is built. So thank you very much. We will quickly move to Chunga Sitali from the Human Rights Commission to hear how then do we, what are the redress platforms? Where can people
Emanuela, hello, we've lost you.
so that we leave some. Hello, can you hear me?
We lost you for a bit. We lost you at redress.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yes, I was trying to wind up Yande's perspective and just say that evidence is indeed important in building up a legal case. And I was then inviting Chunga Sitali from Human Rights Commission to just take us through what is available there in just a few minutes to allow for some questions from the participants. But in the meantime, please feel free to type your questions in the chat, and the panelists will already start attending to them. Over to you, Chunga.
Hello, Chunga, are you in?
Looks like they're off. I saw them just now. Oh, they're still here. Can you hear us? Okay, maybe we can take one question from the participants. Please raise your hand if you have a question. While I think on the side, Amelia tries to assist Chunga if he's having any technical difficulties. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and the panelists are here and they're available to take on your question or contribution. Yes, Lucy, please go ahead with your question.
Hello, everyone.
Lucy, yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation and giving me the opportunity. Sorry, I joined it late, but I heard the presentation from Zambia. My question is, how do they work with their police and the health workers? I'm saying this because the issues, it seems it's common with Malawi. I'm a sex worker, and I'm also running an organization in Malawi, but the issues are the same. So I don't know in Zambia if you still have DICs under usage, because it was easy for KP to get services rather than in health facilities. It's the same in Malawi. We have challenges here in Malawi to get services in public services, health workers, in government hospitals. So I wish if the police using the VISU victim support unit, maybe to work direct with cabinet organizations, so that maybe other issues can sort it, rather than to make our sex workers not going to get services in the government hospitals. It will be difficult, and it will bring challenges, because others, those who are HIV positive, they will default. Hello?
We can get you.
Hello? You can hear me?
Hello, can you hear us? Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So if there's opportunity that you can have a KP-friendly services in the government hospital, it can be good, because it's difficult because we don't have DICs in other countries since after usage cut out. And my question goes to the Zambia about the sex workers who are young for 15 years. How do they deal with them? Because here in Malawi, they said we cannot give them services because it seems like we are promoting sex work. So I want to learn from them. I don't know if I missed the presentation somewhere. But by the end of the day, they're supposed to receive the services. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for that question. I don't know if this is another hand that would like to answer. If this is a hand, if I was going to call on Brenda, maybe Brenda, you can speak to the last question that Lucy had asked, is how, especially coming from She's, do you deal with the underage persons that are engaging in sex work? Do you provide services for them? You speak on that, then I can also speak on that too. Brenda, you can go.
We have the young sex workers that are 19 to 24. Yeah, we do help them in, especially when they're accessing SRHR, but it's a challenge when you go to a government clinic, because you see, they say we always promote sex work. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so it's a challenge. Whenever we want to access help, they will always say, you are promoting sex work. You understand? And then they will just call their colleagues. These are sex workers. So that discrimination, at times, we just feel like, okay, we are not part of the general hospital anymore. Because long before we had our self spaces, it was very easy for us to access our services. But this time around, we treat ourselves. Whenever we have STI, we go and buy medicines from the pharmacy than going.
Hello, Brenda. I
Hi,
think maybe
Amelia. Perhaps because we're really running behind time now, and
For
I'm
someone to
sorry.
get. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me, Brenda?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we were able to hear you, but we were breaking up a bit. So we were just about to say that because we're running out of time, perhaps you could type the rest of your response in the chat, just so we can hear very quickly from Chunga Sitali in maybe like 5 minutes or so, and I ask for all our participants' indulgence. We did start 5 minutes past the hour, just so we can quickly hear a very important intervention from Human Rights Commission, and then we will be able to wind up. But please do continue with questions, comments, and contributions in the chat. So Chunga, please go ahead.
Chunga,
Are you
Chunga.
trying to speak?
No, they seem to be held up. They had asked for 5 extra minutes, but it's been past 5 minutes. Maybe we can continue into the questions because we are 30 minutes to 12.
Okay, all right. Okay, let's continue with the questions. So Brenda can come back on, and then you can also make your contribution, and then we close off at 11:35.
All right, thank you. Brenda, did you want to continue what you had started answering?
Okay, when we're dealing with government facilities, it's a challenge for us FSWs, not only adult but also young sex workers, because when they go, they want to access SRHR. First, they'll tell them about their age, and they're not even eligible to do sex work, and they can't even access family planning, access SRHR. So this is a challenge as young sex workers. They are facing so badly because they don't feel free to open up because they saw you are just promoting sex work. This is against our morals. This is against our culture. You understand? So, okay, it's just a challenge. It's just a challenge when we want to access SRHR, especially for young sex workers. It's a big challenge. Like, we need help in those areas. It's a big challenge. Not only to the facilities, but also to the police station. You find that
Brenda, can you hear us? I think we've lost Brenda. She can finish typing in. For TBZ, when we're dealing with younger persons that are engaged in sex work, the most we can do is provide information, because it is almost, according to the laws, I think social welfare, I stand to be corrected, it is illegal, and we might get in trouble if we have to provide even SRHR services such as commodities like lube and condoms. So with them, we do refer them to like youth hubs in clinics. So we do have youth spaces in clinics. Not in DI, a lot of drop-in centers have closed after the stop order. So like TBZ had a DIC which had closed, and many other organizations on the call had to close down their drop-in centers, their safe spaces, because of this. So what we are doing right now is we're referring them to most clinics, or local clinics have got youth centers, youth spaces, where they're able to get information. But even there, they can only get information and not really commodities such as condoms and lubes, because of the laws. I think they do not allow to provide for. So I think there's some work around trying to get the age of consent lower, so that they are also able to access this. And we're doing this to trying to bring up as much evidence as we can for how many younger persons are engaging in sex work and need this because of socioeconomic barriers. So that's that on that. And I think you had asked if we work with the police at GBV centers and DIC centers. We do try to engage the police, but it's almost impossible to deal with the police from the top. So we need to deal with the police from like the police commissioner, who is able to get this information up to all the police in all the towns, in all the provinces, in all the country. How we engage them is we engage them one by one. We mobilize at least a sensitive police officer. I think from the sharing and the testimonials that were given, a lot of police officers are not as sensitized. And so we risk bringing a police officer into the space who is going to interpret the work that we do wrong. And the next thing, the office of the president is here. They're shutting down offices. They are arresting people for basically what you will be known as you are encouraging. I think Yande had mentioned it, according to morals, the sex work is not allowed, LGBTQ is not allowed. And so we're very careful with which police we engage, because of the nature of the work, and our constitution does not support sex work and does not recognize transgender, sexual minorities and gender minorities. It doesn't recognize them. And so with police, we engage one who we had worked with maybe on one thing and they seem open-minded. And then maybe at the police station, we'll have one that's amenable, or two or three. But the problem also is that police officers get transferred. So this year we're going to engage maybe in our local police stations, we engage even 5, and we're great because we have somebody to refer them to. And then the next year they'll be transferred to other areas way far away from where we are. And then we remain in the place where we are with no police officers. And we are all afraid to approach a police officers and say, these are the issues, because they start to ask questions like, these things are illegal. This is a sex worker. What are you doing? Where do you work? We want to come to your office. Next thing you know, everything is breaking in your office. They're closing down your organization. Those are the challenges that we face. So we don't really have police officers specifically in the DIC centers that deal with key populations.
Thank you, Amelia, and thank you, Brenda. And again, a very big thank you to all of our panelists. You've really given insights that I think many of us would not have known about if not for you coming up and sharing what exactly happens and how it is that you interact with trying to access SRHR services and your interactions with the police. We had hoped to have Chunga Stali from the Human Rights Commission to speak about the complaints procedures, but I think he's had quite a bit of they've had quite a bit of technical difficulties joining in. What we have done is we've posted
I was on
we've posted a complaint. We've posted a complaint form in the chat that perhaps could help people in submitting their complaints. But you've heard from TBZ, you've heard from shares. So for people that are in Zambia, these are organizations that are right there in your context where you can reach out to them and they're available, to offer help, to offer insights. I think Chunga Sitali has been able to post in the chat there. We can see it says state and independent human rights complaints mechanisms are on 3 levels. So that's national, regional, and international level. So these mechanisms allow individuals to report human rights violations and abuses at those 3 levels. At national level, there's the human rights institutions, and at regional and international level, of course, they are independent bodies. So I think the conversation doesn't need to end here. We can approach these bodies, we can see how we can fight for our rights. We've heard from the lawyers as well, and we've heard what the legal landscape and legal environment looks like. So that I don't take up too much of your time, we will wind up. I'll just ask Amelia if you have any closing remarks before we let our participants go.
I wanted to say on behalf of TBZ, thank you to Southern African Litigation Center, #1, for getting this. I will be able to share your brief with all the other organizations that have come. Thank you to the other organizations that responded to our invite. I think we're all in this fight together, all trying to make sure that everyone's rights are respected, and maybe just come up with ways in which we best can approach that, so that in the near future lives are changed and we have a different set of problems and not basic human rights. So thank you so much for SALC. We value your partnership and your work that you do with us and how much you help. And also thank you to the other organizations for taking your time off mourning. I know this is the end of the year and everybody is extremely busy. Thank you to our speakers. I know some of you were short notice just because others had to cancel short notice. So thank you so much for sharing. Machwani, Mimi, thank you so much for coming through, as well as Brenda. And then also thank you to our speakers. Thank you so much, Izzy and Vivian, for the presentation. It was very enlightening. And please, we are open to doing more work together. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't think I have anything to add from what you've said. And Chunga has very graciously said that he will share the presentation with Emilia. And I know, Emilia, you will reach out to all the contacts and all the organizations that have joined in today and share this very vital information. So thank you again, everyone from us at SALC and from TBZ. Have a lovely rest of the day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.